All right. So YouTube is just a little bit behind us. So apologies to those who are waiting to watch, and we're a little bit late. That's my fault. We have with us myself, the Mayor of Highland, Rod Mann, Dr. Scott Smith, a council member, and his son-in-law, Harold Lewis. Harold is involved in cybersecurity, and so I guess we can also take questions on those kinds of issues if you want to later. What I'd first like to do, since this is something we hear all the time on the news every day, let's just talk a little bit about the pandemic. And I'd like Scott to share, or Dr. Smith or Councilman Smith to share some of his thoughts on where we are today and what we have to look forward to in the future with respect to COVID-19.
Okay. Any particular things you'd like me to address, Mayor?
Well, what should we be concerned about locally, and what are the projections for, say, vaccines and or treatments? And you've had some experience with COVID and some of your patients. Is it getting less virulent over time? Are your patients doing better now than they did at first with this?
Okay, let me just kind of tell you my experience. As a primary care physician, we've been dealing with coronavirus issues since the end of March. I actually had a very sick patient during most of the month of April. And at that time, we had him in the hospital actually for 19 days. We were able to keep him off of a ventilator, but he required high flow oxygen. And during that time, I learned a lot about the coronavirus. It was interesting because through the hospital system, they had numerous specialists that we could consult with over the phone. And it was interesting at that particular time, I'd ask questions, what do I need to do about this issue and this issue? And what tests do I need to order? And I was reading as much literature as I could find. And the answer oftentimes is we don't know. We just don't have an answer. And these were the kind of the head infectious disease doctors in the Intermountain West that we were talking to. So things have changed dramatically over the last 8 months. We now have a lot of experience, and certainly everyone's aware of the number of people who have been tested in the state of Utah, well over 1 million people, and the number who have contracted it in the state. I think we're getting close to about 10%, 11% of those that are being tested now are positive. But my experience has been, in my practice, I've had probably about 50 positive COVID tests that have come back. Of those 50, I had the one fellow in the hospital that was very sick at first. I recently had a second patient in the hospital. There have been two patients that I'm aware of have been on home oxygen, because one of the big problems with the coronavirus is what we call hypoxia or low oxygen. And the other 46 patients basically have either had no symptoms at all, which I would say 50% of them had very minor symptoms like cold-like symptoms, or they had, kind of more like a severe influenza symptoms. And some of them were sick for up to 10 days. I've spent a lot of time talking to people on the phone or through telemedicine, kind of coaching them through it. But I've been surprised at how many people, especially in the last few months, have not been real symptomatic, especially young people. So I had a patient just 2 or 3 weeks ago, a man who had smoked most of his life. I was really nervous that he would get it. He did get it. His wife contracted it at first, but my colleague followed him through the phone, actually just saw him a week ago, and he did fine. He says he felt pretty ill for 2 or 3 days. My gut feeling is that the virus has mutated. I think the literature supports that. I think it's actually more contagious now, but it's less virulent. And by that, I mean, people don't seem to be getting quite as sick. Now, I'm not discounting though the fact that people who are highly susceptible to it and have other health problems or are aged are at still risk. So we just had a very excellent nurse who worked in a department of the Utah Valley, who just passed away from it. She was only 49. We just also had a physician in his early 70s who was a plastic surgeon who passed away last week. So I'm not discounting the seriousness of it, but it seems like those who get really sick are either one, pretty old, many of them have been in nursing home situations, or they have a lot of other mitigating, complicating factors. The big one seems to be obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and underlying lung conditions. Now, that said, the last patient I had in the hospital a week or so ago was a lady who I was really nervous for. And she ended up in the intensive care unit, needed lots of oxygen, but she received the therapeutics that I'm going to mention. And she actually went home from the hospital, having been in the intensive care unit 3 days before. She was back in her home by Monday, and she came in on Friday. Wow. So what we have now, which the big improvements are, is we have some antiviral drugs. The FDA has approved remdesivir. If people come in and require high flow oxygen, or they think they're going to need to be intubated, which we're not seeing that much, they receive remdesivir. This is one of the drugs that President Trump received about 6 weeks ago. And that's pretty available now in hospital situations. It's an IV drug, has to be given in the hospital. The other medication we're using a lot of is dexamethasone, 6 milligrams. If you're on oxygen at all, you can be started on that. So the question I get asked by a lot of people, did the hydroxychloroquine that we've used to treat lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, does it make a difference? Should you be on it? You know, the jury's still out on that. I think some people take it early on and seem to do okay. My first patient was on it for a few days. We don't traditionally give it in, or we're not giving it therapeutically now so much in the hospital. Other people in the literature, if you read, vitamin D3 seems to help, zinc seems to help. So there's other things that go on. I've had a lot of people call up and want steroid inhalers, which seem to help. So in the early days, the feeling was we just didn't do any steroids at all. Now that's one of the main treatments. So what I'm actually seeing is, one, I'm seeing a lot more people test positive. I'm seeing a majority of those people that are not real sick. I see flu people that seem to be sicker in some ways, although there's still the exceptions of people that are very sick. And as you can see in the last week, I think we've had 17 deaths that they think are associated with it. So my feeling is this, I just think, what can we do? Do lockdowns make sense? No, the World Health Organization came out and said they don't make sense because there's a lot of collateral damage. I've talked about this in city council because I'm seeing the collateral damage from people being isolated and economic hardship when they lose their job and can't work. And I've seen a lot of my elderly patients who have become very depressed. Some people almost suicidal. So I think what we need to do is we need to just not shaded big groups, need to use social distancing, wash your hands, clean surfaces, and wear a mask. And if people did that, I think it would blunt the rise of this infection. But the most important thing is the fact that vaccines are becoming and soon will be available. People are all aware of the fact that Pfizer just announced that they're through this phase 3 trials. There's tens of thousands of people that have had the vaccine, 90% plus mounted immune response, which is pretty amazing. There's several other companies that by the end of the year will announce that their phase 3 trials are done. Most of them are finding that the vaccine's very safe. People in the hospital, I had one of the reception secretaries on the medical surgical ward. She said to me, well, will you get the vaccine? I said, well, I'll be first in line because I'm not afraid of vaccines, never have been. I've had a number of vaccines in my life. And actually, if you look at the history of medicine, vaccines actually have resulted in the lengthening of people's lives by and large, because we've eliminated a lot of the complications from very infectious disease. So I'm an optimist. I think if we're careful, we can kind of blunt the rise of cases we're having. But at the same time, one of the reasons we have as many cases is that we have lots of testing now. And we didn't have a lot of testing available at first, so we probably missed a number of cases, but most of those people survived. So any other questions or
I'm not seeing any questions from the audience, so nope, no questions. We have 3 viewers right now, but this gets recorded and gets watched more than once afterwards. So the people that watch afterwards just can't ask the questions. So before we get started on what's working in the area of race and bias and stuff, and Harold has a perspective that we don't have in that regard. Maybe I could just ask you, Scott. So you're more than halfway through your 2nd term.
Yes.
Are you still learning things? Is Highland evolving or changing, or what's different now than on your 1st term?
Well, I think the demographics of the city have changed some. At this stage in Highland, when I was on the council before, on 2010 to 2013, we were dealing with a lot of financial issues in the city at that time, because with the recession at the end of the first decade of the century, growth and everything stopped. I think one year we had maybe 17 applications for housing starts. So now we're in kind of a different stage, in that there's a lot of development going on, and certainly with interest rates as low as they are, and I know that we're always having lots of applications to develop the last open areas in Highland that people are willing to sell and have developed. So it's a different feel than it was the first time around.
So you
Yeah.
tell me if this is accurate. I heard that there was a time in those early years that the city had to decide every month which bills to pay and which bills to not pay, because
Yes.
we just didn't have the cash flow at the time.
Right. The cash flow in 2010 was really tight. And actually, Mayor Ritchie, who came in and kind of managed the city for about 6 months as we were in between city managers, he later told the council, he says, yeah, we were delaying bills in order to, make sure there was enough payment to cover them. So that's not the case now. I mean, we still run a very tight budget. We're very thrifty, frugal, and different things, but we have, the funds available to pay the bills on time. Back in 2010, we spent a lot of time, went through the budget with a fine tooth comb, and at that time, cut spending wherever we could. And I think it paid off, and it got a city on a little stronger financial footing. During the first decade, there was tremendous growth in the city and tremendous income coming in, but that suddenly stopped. And so we had to make a lot of adjustments. So, we still deal with a lot of issues with open space issues, parks, a lot of things that we dealt with, 10 years ago. But I think we're finding good solutions to the things. By and large, I think people have been very good suggestions, participate. I think people are being much more civil in many discussions that we're having on the city level. So I actually see some marked improvement. I think right now there's good rapport on the council and with the staff. I think we have an excellent city staff that works really hard for us.
I agree with that. The current staff is really, really good. And they're sincere. They're, nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes, but they all try to do their best, and they're trying to do what's right for everyone. So there aren't hidden agendas. So I like that a lot. I don't see a lot of, and I'm here at the office quite a bit, and I don't know, Harold, if you've ever walked into an office and you can just feel tension, or it's a happy place. But when you come here, there used to be tension here, and now it's people get along. There's not a lot of backbiting, and it's just a nice place to work. I mean, if I had to choose to work somewhere, I wouldn't mind working here, because it's a nice healthy place to work. So, when you face the public, you're always subject to people that aren't happy and grumpy, but
Well, and I think the council, I mean, we have, pretty intense discussions. We have disagreements. But by and large, I think we all consider ourselves to be friends and colleagues. And I think that's good. And I think we have a good rapport with our mayor. So that's great.
You know what? And I like that you guys disagree, because whenever there isn't disagreement, I feel naked, because I feel like we're missing something. That somebody, if we're all just blindly going along a path, and unless somebody says, but what about this and that and the other thing? And a lot of times you end up in a better place when people ask questions, and not necessarily where you thought it was going to go. So I appreciate the fact that you guys don't always agree, and that you have discussions, and we won't call them arguments, but we can call them arguments because you're not agreeing. But to me, they're productive. So
I agree 100%.
So speaking of that, Harold, so this year has been an interesting year, to say the least, on a whole bunch of different fronts. One of them was the racial issues throughout the country, and to be honest with you, for me, it's just really wearing at this point in time, and I would like to have the discussion evolved kind of around what are we doing right, and what could we do better in that regard, as opposed to what are we doing wrong. So we had a discussion, I think you might have listened in, Scott, on that one, where we were talking with several families that were either mixed race or just Black couples. And one of the gentlemen said, there's bias everywhere. You always have to deal with it. But in my case, in your case, you can hide. Like if you think there's a bias against your religion, you don't have to bring religion up, right? But in my case, if there's a bias about race, I can't hide it, right? It's there all the time. And if I have to live in your world, I can't go hide somewhere else. So I go, oh yeah, I never thought about that. But so there's one difference. But what are the positive things you think are happening, Harold, especially in our area? We don't need to worry about the rest of the country for now, but our area.
Sure thing.
Now you're muted.
I'm muted. Okay. Yeah.
Let's see. Let's unmute Scott.
Okay. I think that ought to be good.
Yep.
Sound good, man?
Yep. Okay. I liked it 3 times, but.
So really when it comes to the issue, like you said, at a national level, that's not really what we're here to, really discuss. I watched the previous sessions, and I loved the discussion that was going on. I loved the progress. And from my perspective, what is very positive that's happening right now in Utah and, in Highland and in Lehigh, where I live. So I'm a neighbor of everyone here.
Repent. Highland, right, Scott? He can always repent and move to Highland.
Well, I love the in-laws, but there needs to be, a certain amount of being able to get there immediately, and for their sanity.
Yes, we have this physical distancing thing, and it applies not just to COVID. I'll buy that.
That's right. And so what I really love is the ability to have this discussion, that people are thinking about it. And in general, I think everyone wants to, for the most part, make the state, make the city as welcoming a place as they can be. And the consideration is coming up that kind of like was discussed in the last meeting. The idea that if I'm not part of the solution, I may be actually part of the problem. And I know it sounds that's a little bit of a cliche to say, but people are looking for a better way to address this and to make Utah, let's just say, the place that we know it is going to be. There are so many people flowing into Utah from all over the world, and that's the way it should be. And I'm excited, at least living here, that this is something. This is a direction that we've been going in and will continue to go in.
So where did you grow up, Harold?
So I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. In fact, if you don't mind, I've got a few slides, a couple of pictures. Is that okay?
Love to see them.
Okay. So I'll share my screen.
Do I have to let you do that, or?
I don't think so. I think I get to do that
in a
minute. Yeah. I'll minimize everything here. And then just play, this. Basically, my life in Utah has been, really nice. I love, getting outdoors and, really spending time outside. But my family, this is the state that I built a family in. I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, and moved out here for college at BYU. I always say I got my MRS, and she's obviously from right here in Highland.
Yep.
And, this is, 13 years, 3 kids later, this is home. I come from a family, from a background. You can see my grandparents in the first 2 pictures there on the left, and my parents on the right. And
in the military?
Yes, my father or my grandfather was in the Air Force. Actually, his plane was lost when my father turned 13 months old. So he went MIA, but we never discovered exactly what happened.
So was that the Korean War or World War II?
It was 1957. So I'm not sure, I should probably look into those details, but the fact is that my family came from a family of that had strong ties to marriage, to family building, to those types of relationships. And they carried on over to me, and as I built a family out here. I think this is something that, at least for me, the misconceptions, the silly things that go on, the rhetoric, especially when it comes to, being Black in America, of, there's a lot of family problems there. That, I think as a country, we're heading in some negative directions there, which is sad to see. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's where everyone comes from. I think that the strong values that that bring a family together aren't specific to one race, one background, one type of people or another. And I have 3 kids that that are beautiful. They are in school out here. They love being back in school, masking up, regardless of masks or no. Children are so flexible that they're able to roll with the punches, and really show some care and some decency for each other. You can see on the picture on the right, my boy is, it's his 6th grade year, and he's hugging his little sister, who this was her first year going to school. So really, there's the ability to enjoy what Utah has to offer, which is, of course, the great outdoors. You can see my family. My parents are in Oklahoma City now. My sister's in Texas. You can see us out for a walk on a day in October, I think 2 years ago. And, you know, to us Utahns, it was a nice warm 50 something degrees outside, but you can see my parents and my sister bundled up like, you know, we're going expecting a blizzard or something. The sun is even shining that day.
What was their experience coming to Utah? Did they
So,
have preconceived notions? And
so I think a lot of, they were my preconceived notions as well, coming to Utah. When I first moved out, a lot of my idea and feeling about Utah was that had a lot to do with the culture. I'll say that. As a member of, you know, the prevailing religious denomination out here, I think a lot of the thought and expectation was very similar. Was you know, what type of a religious experience could we expect? And really, it has been a lot more about the community. The religious experience is certainly a big part of life in Utah, but it's not the only part of life in Utah. And so as they have come out, really what we do is we try to get them into the great outdoors a lot more often. Because my wife and I have, you know, we have a plot to get my parents to move out here. And part of that plot involves convincing, I guess, the lion's share of their grandchildren to make the, you know, journey out here. My sister and her family who live in Arkansas. And so if we can do that,
the long-term plan, you get the grandchildren here and then the parents come, right?
That's right. That's right. They can't say no by that point. So we'll hold the grandkids hostage out here. But as you can see, we do have a bit of extended family. You can, this is all of us when we were vacationing, I think 2 or 3 years ago in Galveston, Texas.
Okay.
But here's my sister. This was honestly the best picture I could find of my sister, who also lives in Lehigh. No, I'm kidding. She's going to be terrified, horrified to know that I use that picture of her. But she lives out here in Utah as well. And really, I have a coworker. I had a coworker, like you said, I work in cybersecurity. And I had a coworker as changes were being made at our company. And he was originally from California. And I asked him, you know, as we were changing and it looked like, you know, there'd be some moves made. I asked him if he was planning on moving back to California. And he said, no, I'm going to stay in Utah. I think Utah is one of the best kept secrets in the US. And really, there are just so many opportunities to move and grow, at least for me and my family. That's what we found.
So you've been able to stay here and go, I know you worked at Symantec. Was that in here as well in Utah? That was.
Yep. They had an office up in Draper. Most recently, they've been bought out by Broadcom. And before that, they were Blue Coat, and we, you know, you know how technology goes. It's always, you know, kind of one company gobbling another, and a lot of them have been Utah based. This is one of the reasons I'm in Utah, and you know, not maybe another state in the South. There is so much opportunity in technology out here. Again, you know, the best and the brightest minds seem to be, you know, coming out here, and it's great. My family and I built in Lehigh 9 years ago, before Adobe went in, before, you know, all of the things out SR92, and the community has just exploded around us, you know. So we were really fortunate to be able to get in at the time that we did. And you know, this is a place that we're hoping to stay.
Awesome. Well, we're glad you're here, actually.
Well, thanks.
I'd get to know you. I met you first a couple of weeks ago, briefly at the Halloween trick or treat that we had by City Hall. I don't even know if I saw you. I don't remember if I introduced myself to you or not, but I saw you with your kids there.
Yep.
So that was a good evening. Are there things you think we could do better? Because I know with a lot of people, I think a lot of it is just unconscious bias that we have in all aspects of our life, right? We don't intentionally do anything. And sometimes I unintentionally say things that might bother other people, but there's no malice behind it. So
Sure.
I guess one of the things I would ask people always to do is assume good intent on the part of the other person.
Yes. And that's, I think that is so key. What they call a good faith argument. I think that goes in so many different directions. Being slow to take offense if you feel like offense is, being given. My mother had a saying growing up: only a fool takes offense where none is intended, and a greater fool takes offense where it is. So when we're able to have these discussions, in fact, stories kind of coming to mind. While I was working at Semantic, I had a coworker who approached me and said, basically asked a question and said, hey, Harold, I don't understand, what's the big to do in the news and politics nowadays, when people are saying that blacks are less intelligent than whites. That's a fact, statistically speaking. Blacks have a lower IQ, than whites do. And understanding that this is the workplace, and I thought to myself, jumping out of my seat and punching this guy in the nose or something like that. That's really not a way to have a discussion. And I recognized that he wasn't doing this out of malice. He was genuinely confused. And so we sat down and we had a discussion that I had to say, okay, I understand where you're coming from and what you're thinking. You've heard this on talk radio, maybe on your drive into work. But this study that, you've read, and he's like, well, I didn't read it. I just heard someone else discussing it. And I said, okay, I think I know what study it is because I've read it. And actually, it doesn't say that. There are some people with nefarious intentions out there that want to skew, what that understanding was. But that isn't the case. And so we sat down and, it took me 5 or 10 minutes to kind of walk him through the fact that the color of someone's skin, their race, actually doesn't have any bearing on, their intelligence quotient. And that's not something that is strictly tied to genetics on the basis of race. And after we were able to, discuss that, agree on it, he said, oh, okay, now I understand why that's offensive, why, why people, around the world or around at least the nation are calling that out as, racist. With a lot of the, political, upheaval with, different protests, different, things like that. I always find it very interesting to try to understand the logical fallacies, the kind of hole in my reasoning when I come across some sort of a bias. I think, for instance, putting aside the organization Black Lives Matter, just the phrase saying that Black Lives Matter inherently isn't something that would say that, oh, well, other lives don't. That's just silly. That is something that is a logical fallacy, to say, okay, well, if, blue lives matter, well, then do troop lives not matter? Do soldiers, whatever else. And again, when you kind of step back and, try and question those things, and when we're able to have conversations about it, I actually had right here, oh, this is a picture of this silly outfits that my wife, forces us to wear. But in my actual family, mostly in Oklahoma and back in Arkansas, Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. That's not those two sentiments, those two statements are not in opposition. Both can matter at the same time, and both can matter equally. There's been in my family so much in the way of police service, military service, medical service, really trying to give back, not just to the community, but to the country that we live in and that we love. The picture in the far right is me in Civil Air Patrol back in high school. While I didn't, serve in the military, so many members of my family have, my father and grandfather included.
Was that the picture on the left, bottom left? Is that your grandfather's plane?
Yes, that was.
That
is, I want to say a Starfire, Spitfire, something like that. My dad is gonna is gonna pull out what little hair he has left. No, this is in fact in the upper left corner is a picture of my grandfather, as well as right next to it another of him, and the few that we have left. But it is something that I have always been raised with an undying love for my country. And it is an honor and a privilege to be here, because the promise of America, in my opinion, is greater than the promise of any country that has ever existed. And the only way we get to fulfill on that promise, I mean, it is an awfully big check that the Constitution writes. Each and every citizen, black, white, and any other denomination, any other race or creed or background or culture, we all have to work together in order to make sure that there is enough in the moral bank account of America to be able to cash that check. So
awesome. Well, your family has put money in the bank there. I can clearly see that.
Sure. And I'll go ahead and stop sharing here. But I guess really what my feeling about Utah, my feeling about Highland, is that we have the ability to become everything we were meant to be. And I really, really appreciate the city council. I appreciate you for putting these types of councils together, because it feels so good to be able to be heard, to be able to have these discussions. And it's not all bad. I've always said, at least in my work, sometimes I'm talking to a boss and I say, oh, okay, and boss, I'm sorry, if it feels like I'm complaining about things, because guess what? You wouldn't be hearing this if I didn't have faith that we're almost there, that we have an interest in getting to where we want to be as a team, where we want to be as a company. The more that you hear that is a good sign. It is a sign that, in my opinion, that your people have faith that something can be done, that you're a team that fixes things, that we are a society that wants to do better, and that is doing a lot better than we have in times past. So.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the perspective there and the, the positive nature. So I'm going to ask a sneak question of you. So you were part of Scott's family when he was on council the first time.
Yep.
And I imagine. So is it less, from your observation, and I'm glad you moved to a different room, is Scott enjoying this time better or less stressful than last time or same, or because I know there's a learning curve when you become a councilman first. I know that. So better.
I can just tell you from our observation, it feels like this is maybe a little more relaxed. Now, there were other issues that we were working on, last time around when it came to, local construction projects. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
That, isn't so personally affecting.
Right.
But I do feel like I can say and we call him Grandpa Smith. Grandpa Smith is has a lot wider of an ability to I feel like with this council to work and negotiate. It isn't. You maybe mentioned that things weren't as combative when you're able to work with people who really don't always agree, but everybody's trying to get the best done for the city that they can. And so there is definitely a lot of that feeling. I can say that. So.
All right. Okay. Sorry to put you on the spot, and Scott, my apologies. That was a good answer.
No problem. I'll get even.
We won't delve further into anything that might not have such a good answer. So what, Scott, so what do you see as currently issues that are really important that we need to work on as a council in the city? These, by the way, this was not planned. This is all ad hoc. So anybody that's watching, don't be too harsh because we haven't thought through any of these things. But I have some pet things. Do you have any pet things that are?
Well, I think we've come on agreement on some things in the past that have been controversial, but I think the big issues in the city right now are maybe threefold. One, we're experiencing a lot of growth at this particular time. So we have, two major projects that are going to be occurring. The development of the Reinhardt property down in the Mitchell Hollow area. And I think the compromise there where we kept the wetlands as kind of open space was very nice. And we know it'll be a beautiful development.
Really well. That turned out really well.
Yeah. And we have the Bertie South High School, and the Bear Group and the USDC have been good to work with. We've been able to cut the density back. It'll be high quality housing there, and it does provide the opportunity for some senior living. And we eliminated any apartment buildings, which I think is consistent with kind of the values and goals in the city. I think those developments are working out. The east-west corridor is going in, which will help with transportation issues. I know our city engineer has been so busy trying to get all these road projects done. I mean, like 6800 West and in the east-west corridor. So, those things, the development issues, I think are coming together. I think one of the big issues, though, that we're going to finance or that we're going to face as a city is financial responsibility, because by and large, we run this city on very tight budget, and we have limited resources and revenue. The people have chosen to keep this a bedroom community without a lot of commercial, although a lot of cities, garner a lot of money from sales tax. We do a fair amount, but I think we're trying to preserve the values of Highland, which is the lower density and more of a bedroom community and more family oriented. So those are things, but we're going to have to make some hard decisions on financial things, because with growth comes demand for more services, and the question is how do you pay for those? And so we're going to have a continued discussion with the citizens of Highland about what services they would like and how they would like to pay for them, and how to do that. But I think as a council, on both councils I've been on, we've been really working hard to keep our expenditures down and do things efficiently. I mean, if you compare our budget to the surrounding cities for our population, I think the citizens of Highland should be very pleased at how efficiently we run. But financial issues are a big problem. So the third issue has to do with our parks and trails. I think we're making good progress on resurfacing the roads and things, but we have a lot of trail maintenance we need to do. We have a lot of issue about what do we want to do with our park space, and what services and amenities would we like to provide? And again, it becomes an issue, how are we going to pay for that? So linked to that has been some of the issues we've had with the open space neighborhoods, where many of the trails and parks are. And I think, we're going to look forward to ways to improve the maintenance of the amenities that they experience, especially the trails. And hopefully we can link the trails together so that we have a good system. I've spent a lot of time on the trails this summer. I kind of do what I call slow jogging, but I enjoy the trails very much, and other members on the council are on the trails a lot. So we appreciate that amenity. So the three things I think, basically in summary, is we've got this growth and development. We need to look at how we're going to finance future needs and find out what the desires of the citizens are, and how to resolve some of the other maintenance issues we have. I think those are the main issues that I'm looking at. There's other things that come in, like ranked choice voting and all those other things that we discussed. But I think those are the main things that I'm looking at. Is that helpful, Mayor?
Yeah, that is helpful.
Yeah.
When you spoke on transportation, we have a couple of expectations that have been set that we're going to miss on. One of them is the east-west connector, the Canal Boulevard extension. We missed the paving window for this year, unfortunately, by that much. And we're going to have to wait till the spring to put down the asphalt. So rather than be completed this year before the end of the year, we'll have it early summer, late spring next year. And the issue there was, and this is going to sound odd, but we had to build a bridge over the river that's down there, and a part of that involved putting some footings down. And those footings required rebar, and for some reason, rebar was in low supply, and it cost about 6 weeks of time for the rebar to come in and have them complete that. So that put them pretty far behind, and then it got cold, and the asphalt factories are shutting down before Thanksgiving, and so we're not going to be able to pave it. I'm glad we're not pushing it, because when you pave when it's really cold, there can be issues with the surface that make it last less long, or last a shorter amount of time before you need maintenance. So apologies to the residents that road isn't going to be completed until the spring. Our contractors tried their best, and we just had some things out of our control. And then we also had a project, and it was a little bit at risk to be done this year, and I think people were aware of that. But 68,000, the road to Costco, won't get underway until next year, but it should be done well before the end of the paving season. We've had some property acquisition issues that we're going through, and so we just, with those unresolved, we can't go out to bid. And so that's just going to get delayed. They are going to get done. but they're just going to be a little bit later than we thought. So the 40-year wait on the East-West Connector might end up being 41 years. So maybe we're not as good as the children of Israel in the wilderness, but it will get done. It'll just be a little bit later than we hoped. With respect to trails, Scott, you might laugh at this, but my biggest priority is I just don't want to see puncture weeds. I hate them. And if all we do next year is start a meaningful puncture weed abatement program, and we make good progress on that, as well as the paving part, because we'll continue to work on the paving. But for me, puncture weed abatement is one of the primary trail issues that I've seen. We had them on.
And you're absolutely right. One of the issues has always been, especially as the open space trails have aged, it's just been a maintenance issue. And 10 years ago, when I listened to a lot of the concerns from the open space neighborhoods, the issue was we didn't have the finances, nor the resources, nor the staff to maintain things. But those things are improving. We do have some revenue coming from the county gas tax, which helps us. And I think we're going to hopefully be hiring a little more staff to maintain things. And we're looking at other options, with maintenance agreements. I mean, some of the trails are beautifully maintained, not only by the staff, but by the neighbors. And I think we're going to look more towards that. I think Brent Wallace was talking about that last night, and how we're going to have to use some volunteers and people to help us with those things. Because if we're going to keep taxes and fees as low as we can, we're going to have to find alternate ways or other ways to help maintain things. And I think we've got a city of great people who are very willing to volunteer and to help and are service oriented. So hopefully we can kind of get some more of that involvement as well.
So something else that's going to happen next year that doesn't directly involve Highland is that the pond there, the drainage site by Smith's, just east of Smith's at the dip there, is going to be a 25-acre lake, and there'll be a park on the west side of it. Lehigh's paying for that, but part of that project will involve creating a trail through the open space area below the dam there, and most of that trail is in Highland, so that will be nice. Errol, do you or your kids use the trail systems in the area? You're muted.
Harold, he's asking you questions.
Yeah,
sorry about that.
That's okay.
We do. We once tried the bike trail, out to Grandpa's house.
So you went on the Murdoch Canal Trail?
Yes, and that was a lot of fun. I think we made it halfway here, but
then you had to get picked up, or you just went back?
I think Mom went back and got the car and got the van.
That's why you have them, right? So we have amenities here in the area that are really nice, and the lake is going to be a really nice project. That might actually take some pressure off of Highland Glen, Scott, which will make that nicer for people. I think. I don't know, because you're down there in the summer. Highland Glen can get very busy, right?
Oh yes, very much so.
Now,
so Harold and his family live on the other end of the Murdoch Canal Trail. I mean, they won't be very far from where they can access that. So there'll be another way for him to come over and visit us, as he was talking about.
So there you go. So that will be nice. Anything else going on, Scott, that we should talk about to the Highlanders that are listening? I typically end this at 8 o'clock.
Highlighted the main issues at this time. we did talk a little bit about maintenance of the trails and things. We know the city staff, just like was done in the past, where they prioritize the maintenance of the roads. Now we're going to come out with a prioritization on the trails. And I think, as we've discussed in council, if you take one step at a time and can show people that we're making improvement in those areas, I think that's great. So we have the Parks Committee that's working on possibly developing the Mountain Ridge Park. And, we've raised some money through the Highland Foundation for that. We have some money from a sale of other parkland.
Yep.
I think one thing that we need to celebrate is the Spring Creek Park. It's a 2.5 acre new park.
Yeah, that is a really nice little park.
That was just, we just inaugurated or had the open house on it about a month ago.
Yep.
And a beautiful subdivision being built there, but very nice amenity. I thought the pavilion was very lovely. I don't know if the tables have got there yet. They were still coming. But I think a lot of families will enjoy that very much. And that's a public park.
Yep.
In fact, it's just going to be right off the east-west corridor. And so that's a great addition.
I agree.
So, I think those things, I believe we're going to have some development in the city center. After many years of discussion, the city center area will be finished with the new development there, Apple Creek.
Yeah, actually, that was how many years? That was like 5 years of talks or more.
Oh, yes, probably closer to 10 because there was discussion when I was on the council before. But I think in the end, we were successful to decrease the high density into it and kind of get some nice office building businesses hopefully there. I think it looked very nice.
Yep,
Yeah.
I'm with you. So that will be interesting to see get developed. There's just and people by and large have been my experience in Highland with COVID and the pandemic have been very helpful to their neighbors, very sensitive. We all get grumpy from time to time, and maybe with COVID and being somewhat limited, there's I won't say a good excuse, but there's an excuse for being a little short occasionally. But I haven't seen it. It seems like it's just been a nicer place this year than last year or 2 years ago. So I'm appreciative of that. We are running out of time. I usually try and end this around 8. I just checked to see if there are any questions. I don't see any. We had up to 9 people watching. We're down to 6. So if any of you watching have a question you'd like us to address on any subject, could be cybersecurity, Harold can step in, or it could be city related. Feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'm going to just be thankful to Harold for joining us. I appreciate your insights, and you're part of our extended Highland family. So you're an honorary Highlander.
Thanks.
We appreciate you being here. Scott, thank you for taking the time. And thank you for all your service. It's appreciated. So look forward to doing this again next month. Not sure what we'll have for topics, but if any of the residents that are watching this or watch this later have strong opinions on what they'd like to hear about, let me know and we'll make that part of the mix. Again, Harold, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Scott. Have a good evening, Highland.